Hi everybody, today in this video I'm going to give you some book recommendations for historical fiction books for beginners. I read a lot of historical fiction. I'm a huge fan of historical fiction and history in general. I study history at university. I think I can say that I do know quite a bit about history, and yeah, I do really love to read historical fiction, which you probably know if you watch my videos. But people have been asking me which book they should read if they want to start out with historical fiction. So basically sort of a guide to historical fiction for beginners, where to start if you want to start with reading historical fiction. So I've chosen some of my favorite books that I think will be very suitable if you want to start out with reading books about historical events. Some of these are based on true stories, some of them are not. But I think all of these will be quite easy to get into if you're not used yet to the historical fiction genre. So that is what I'm going to do today in this video, and yeah, I really hope it will be useful to you. So let's get started, and then I'm going to give you my tips for historical fiction books for beginners. The first book I would like to recommend is The Home for Unwanted Girls by Joanna Goodman. This book tells the story of a girl named Maggie who lives in the 1950s in Quebec in Canada. She gets pregnant at the age of 15 without being married, so that's very much not acceptable, and she is forced to give up her baby for adoption. And then the rest of the book tells the story of Maggie after that and about her life when she gets older, but also about the life of her daughter Elodie, who is being brought up in the orphanage system, but there are a lot of problems with that, and it's also about that historical event. So like the problems with the orphanage system in Canada in the 1950s and 60s. So this might be a historical event that you probably don't know much about, because I didn't know anything about it before I read this book. But why I would recommend it as a good historical fiction book for beginners is because this book, even though it's very emotional and a very heavy topic, it's written in quite a simple way, and I feel like it's very approachable. The story in itself is quite simple. It's about a girl who is forced to give up her baby. It is very sad and tragic, but then after that, yeah, I guess the premise is just quite simple. It's not very difficult to get into or anything. I really love the writing style. Again, it's very easy and very straightforward, but still in a beautiful way. All the characters are very much interesting to read about, and for me it was also something that drew my attention, that this is a historical place and time that I just don't know anything about. So because I didn't know anything about it, I was even more interested in it, so I was even more eager to finish this book. It is also a book I haven't heard a lot of people talk about yet, but I really think people should, because it's a very, very good one. It's beautiful, but it's also, again, very easy and a very good book for historical fiction beginners. My next recommendation would be The Tattooist of Auschwitz by Heather Morris. This book tells the true story of the man who used to be the tattooist in Auschwitz. His name was Lali Sokolov, and it's about his life in Auschwitz and about him trying to survive no matter what. And I want to recommend this one because World War II books are very popular amongst the historical fiction genre. There are a lot of World War II books, and of all of the World War II books that I've read so far, I think The Tattooist of Auschwitz is one of the easiest to begin with. I find it sort of hard to explain why, but with this book, I read it in, I guess, one day or something. It's just a book that you fly through so easily, even though, again, it's about a very serious and tragic event and topic. So definitely there are things that might be hard to read, you know, because it was war and it's Auschwitz, so it's always going to be uncomfortable and tragic to read about. But still, this book feels quite fast-paced, and because it's based on true events, it makes it even more interesting. And at the end of the book, there's also some more backstory about this and how this book was written and about the true events. And again, I would say that this book is a good one for beginners because it's quite simple in its premise, and also when you start this book, you're thrown into the story straight away, and it's just so easy to get into, and it's so easy to fall into the story and to read about Lali's life and about what happened. And yeah, again, I can't really explain why I think this is a good one for beginners. Apart from that, I read through it so quickly, and my mother has read it as well, and she also said that it was very easy to get through. So yeah, it's just a recommendation for me, and if you want to start out with World War II books, this is a very good one to begin with. I also want to add to that Silkas Journey by Heather Morris, which is the sort of sequel. It follows Silka, who is a character from the tattooist of Auschwitz and also was a character in real life, or like a person in real life. And this one is about events after the war, and it's about Silka's life, and I think I loved this one even more than the tattooist of Auschwitz, maybe because this again is a subject that I know lesser about, because this is like about the aftermath of World War II, at least in some places. And maybe it's because I felt so connected to Silka as a character, and this one is just as easy to read and just as easy to get into. You don't have to read The Tattooist of Auschwitz to read Silka's Journey. Of course, there are some references that, you know, you understand more if you've read The Tattooist of Auschwitz, but overall, this is a story that completely stands on its own. You don't have to read it. So yeah, this is also a recommendation for me. This one is also very easy to read and one that I love very much. To stay with the subject of World War II, I have two books by the same author again, and those are Salt to the Sea and Between Shades of Grey by Ruta Sepetys. Both of these books are about World War II, and Salt to the Sea is about refugees trying to get to a certain ship. I don't want to say more because I really don't want to sort of spoil anything. And Between Shades of Grey is about a camp in Russia and about a family who is being sent there, and the main character is a girl who is trying to survive. Both of these books are also surrounding World War II, and both of these books are about events that are lesser known, so that makes them very interesting. Why I would recommend these two as books for beginners is because these books are written in very short chapters. Because the chapters are so short, it's very easy to read. Like, you fly through this book so quickly because of the short chapters, and that's what makes it so easy to get into. Again, very heavy topic, tragic stories, everything, but yeah, this is one I would definitely recommend as for beginners, because even though the topic isn't easy, I think the books are very easy reads. They are also not too long, so they're not intimidating or anything. Trust me, you will read these very quickly, and then once you've read these, you're very much getting very much into the hang of reading historical fiction. Yeah, I love both of these books again very much. I love all of these books on this list, obviously. Yeah, and these two I would specifically recommend because of the short chapters. Like, they are so easy to read, and yeah, that's sort of, I feel like a broken record because I keep saying easy to read, but that's sort of the gist with all of these books. That's probably why you're also watching this video. Yeah. Very good ones, definitely recommend. Then I have something a bit different, and that is The Seven Husbands of Evelyn Hugo by Taylor Jenkins Reid. This book tells the story of actress Evelyn Hugo, who was very famous in the 1950s and 60s and 70s, and yeah, it's basically about her career in like sort of classic Hollywood. It's not completely historical fiction because there's also sort of the main story in present day where this journalist named Monique is writing down Evelyn's life story, but most of the part is about Evelyn's life story as an actress in the 1950s again, so that part is historical fiction. This one I would recommend because it's not 100% historical fiction, as I said, it's sort of like 80% historical fiction, but also because this one is about movies and Hollywood. Even though it's historical Hollywood, it is still something that is a lot more relatable to people nowadays. What also makes this one so easy to read is that it feels very realistic. Like, I'm sort of sad that Evelyn Hugo isn't a real actress because it feels like it is. It's so vivid and so well described, and because that's so much more easy for most people to sort of picture, you know, an old actress playing in all these famous movies like Katharine Hepburn and, you know, those kinds of people. That makes it so easy to get into the story and read about it, and also the writing style is amazing, and Evelyn Hugo is the most interesting main character ever. She's so well written because she's very flawed at times, but also she is very much willing to do what it takes. And this book also gives sort of like an insight of how the Hollywood system was with actresses. Yeah, it's just beautiful, and I feel like this one is a good one to begin with because it's not fully well, it is historical fiction, but it probably feels less like historical fiction because of the way it's written. But it does give you a taste of what historical fiction can be like, and it's very glamorous, and again, a book that I love very much. Then the next book is Where the Crawdads Sing by Delia Owens. This book is about a girl named Kia who lives in a town in North Carolina, a little town, and it takes place during the 1950s and 1960s again. Kia is a girl who has survived on her own for a very long time in the marsh, which is sort of like a swamp. But then the body of a popular young man named Chase Andrews is being found and his murder is being linked to Kaya. So what I very much love about this book is that it's sort of like multiple genres at once. It's historical fiction, but again, sort of recent historical fiction, so it's still not too long ago and still quite relatable to a lot of people. It is also part romance, and because it's about Kaya, and also, yeah, there's some romance, but also about her life story, so it's also very much a novel. And then it's also part murder mystery, because there's this murder that needs to be solved. So I feel like this book is sort of in this special position of being a lot of different types of genres at once, but still I would mainly put it under historical fiction because, yeah, every book that is not written or does not take place in our time, I just classify as historical fiction. The time period does counter in a bit, but not completely, so it's still a very interesting, beautiful story, even without the historical aspect. So that again is something that I think makes it very good for beginners, because it's more than just historical fiction. And again, it's so easy. Well, this one is maybe a bit harder to read, not hard as in that it's, you know, very long and difficult to get through, but hard as in that maybe the writing style is a bit more, it's very beautiful, but it's a bit less easygoing than some of the other books on this list. It is also a bit about nature and about like the swamp and the nature life there, which is also beautiful. And yeah, it's just a very beautiful story that also happens to be historical fiction, if that makes sense. And that's also why I think if you're not used to historical fiction, then this one will be a good one to sort of, you know, try it out. And apart from that, it is an amazing book that I love very much, so you should read it for that reason alone. And then the last book on this list is a bit of a silly one, but it just had to be there, and that is My Lady Jane by Cynthia Hand, Brody Ashton and Jodie Meadows. So this is sort of historical fiction, but not a very serious one. This book tells the story of Lady Jane Grey, who was Queen of England for 9 days before she got beheaded. But this book takes that story of Lady Jane Grey and then completely twists it around and makes it very funny. This book pretends to tell you the true history of Lady Jane Grey, but it's actually mostly really funny and silly and over the top, but it's hilarious to read. And that's also what makes it a very good one for historical fiction beginners, because it is historical fiction, because it's historical and it's definitely fiction. But it's a historical fiction book that does not take itself seriously. So that might, again, be a good one to begin with, to dip your toes in the historical fiction genre, I guess. This one is just going to make you laugh so much. It's so funny. I would recommend to just look up the story of Lady Jane Grey on Wikipedia, you know, just the basics to understand some of the things that are going on. But apart from that, you don't need to know too much. It is very, very funny. It's a funny book with a historical setting, so yeah. Something, again, a book that I love very, very much. It's hilarious. And yeah, that was it for some of my book recommendations for historical fiction beginners. A bit of a guide to historical fiction for beginners. I really, really hope that this video might be a bit useful to you. That hopefully you get sort of like a starting point where you can begin with your historical fiction journey. And if you have another book recommendation for a historical fiction beginner, then please let me know down below in the description box. And then you can always take a look there if maybe someone else has a good recommendation for you as well. And yeah, let's just help each other with these recommendations. But this was it then for this video, and I really hope you enjoyed this video. And if you did, maybe go subscribe or give it a thumbs up, because as always, I would really appreciate that. And hopefully I will see you again very soon in my next video. Bye!